So, I started looking through papers, newspapers, to see if I could find somewhere to work in New York. Obviously, because the internet at that time wasn't what it was now, as in, it didn't exist. Newspapers, and I found an advert for a job for a construction worker building theatre sets in a children's theatre in New York. That will do me. So I phoned them up. And the guy, Willie Schmidt, on the other end of the phone, he was like, yeah, we've got a vacancy. Construction. Can you build? Can I build? We, Scots, we build everything. Bridges, rivers, we build trees. I'm Scottish, I can build... I once built a wardrobe from IKEA without the instructions. And that impressed him, so he was like, yeah, okay, all right. You can come and work as a construction worker. And so I find myself working in a children's theatre in New York. Unfortunately, it wasn't New York City, it was New York State, Upper New York State, which is full of forests and trees and bears, but they're black bears. They're small. And once you've tackled the grizzly, as I was now telling people, yeah, piece of cake. And so I started work in this theatre as a set designer and builder. Unfortunately, of course, I can't build anything at all, and that became my undoing. Or, in another way, it was what set me really on the path to being a writer. And I bet you were wondering when I was going to get around to actually writing, but, you know, it's part of the story. Bear with me, and we'll see where we get. So, there I was in this 500-seat children's theatre in New York, and the first thing I had to build was a flight of stairs, because the show that they were doing, the kids were going to come running down through the audience for some reason, I don't know, and they were going to run up this staircase that I'd built and onto the stage and do their big number, a musical number. And so they had the children's orchestra were rehearsing in the corner, and I'm figure out what hammer is, and I start to build. Now, I don't know if any of you are au fait with building, but apparently when you build something and you want it to stay up, you use screws. And I didn't know this, so I found these things called 10-penny nails, which are nails, and they're about this length. Brilliant. And I was like, that will do me. That's the very thing. So I built this flight of stairs using these giant nails, all the way and up to the top of the stage, and then I painted it black so you couldn't see all the mistakes. I was pretty pleased with it, actually. So first rehearsal, I move it to the stairs, and the children come in to the top of the hall, and they come running down, and the orchestra's going, and the kids come running down, and they stop. They're like. And I'm like, what? They're like, we're not running up that. I was like, why not? They're like, it wobbles when you touch it. Yeah, I was like, it only wobbles from side to side. You're going up there, it's not going to be a problem. They're like, no, nah, we're not going up there. And I was like, listen, I tell you what, I will run up the stairs first to test it for you. And if it holds my weight, then it will certainly hold your weight, because you are small and I am big. You might have thought that one through a little bit more. So anyway, kids are like, yeah, go ahead then. So, okay, ran up the stairs, stood at the top, and like, da-da! Orchestra. And the whole thing just went, and there was a giant puff of smoke. Dust clouds in the air. Stood up. I was covered in white again. Like, oh, ooh. And the orchestra What? What? And I looked down, in my leg, and there was a plank of wood fastened to the front of my leg, and one of the 10 penny nails had gone right through my shin, missed the bones, out the other side, and then it bent slightly, so you couldn't get it off again. Ding! That's the triangle player. And I was like, does this theatre happen to have a medical facility? Perhaps a nurse? And they're like, yeah, just down that way. And so off I went, very dejected, walking up with a big plank attached to the front of my leg. And I got into the infirmary, and the nurse there, Betsy, I loved Betsy Denton, she was there. She was putting an elastoplast on the child's arm, plaster on his arm. So I came in with the plank attached to my leg, and she was like, so, what appears to be the trouble? Very funny. She's like, okay, hold on, I'll just finish this. I've got a plank on my leg. She's like, oh. So, she finished with the kid, and then she came over and she's like, oh, okay, right, all right. Right, lie on the floor, and I'll get on top of you. And I was like, okay, but I do have a plank attached to my leg. And she's like, yeah, lie on the floor. And I was like, seriously? She's like, yes. And so I lay on the floor, and she got on top of me with her foot on my chest. And I'm like, wait a minute. What? Could we have some anaesthetic? Have you got any whiskey, anything like that? She just pulled the plank right off. Little hair stuck to the end of the nail, and I was like, she's like, do you want some elastoplast on it? And this is where the good part happened, because the finance guy, the guy in charge of finance, came running down. When he heard out what happened, he came running down, burst in, and he was like, oh my god, oh I'm so sorry, what can I do? Because in America, people sue each other all the time for anything. They're crazy about it for suing, and so he didn't want to get sued. And of course I'm like Scottish, I'm trying to be tough. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And Betsy was like, oh no, it's not fine. No, I'm in agony, and it's your fault for letting an idiot like me build things. And the guy was like, oh, okay, well, what can we do? What can we do to make things better? Obviously, you can't go back to construction. Yeah, I think. He's like, yeah, because you're useless. So what can we do to make this better? And I quite liked the theatre. So I thought to myself, I was like, what's the best job in a theatre? I suppose writing and directing, really. And I said, I'd like to be a writer-director in your theatre, please. And he went, can you write and direct? And I was like, yes, I'm Scottish, of course I can write and direct, I write all the time. Diaries, shopping lists. I once wrote a novel in my head, wasn't very good, but he's like, okay, you can, as a matter of fact, there's a space coming up, because someone dropped out, there's a space to put on a show in 3 weeks. So, yeah, just use one of the plays you've already written, and you can put on and direct it. So, up until this point, I'd never written anything in my life. And now I had 3 weeks to write an entire play, and then put it on. So I thought, what can I do? And it suddenly came to me that I'd written this big, long novel in my head when I was working in the canning factory. And I'd basically written another one when I was in Easter Bunny as well. Very violent, very nasty, and that'll do fine for kids. And so I sat down and I wrote from start to finish all the stuff that had been going through my head while I worked in those two places. And for good measure, I threw in the bear as well. I thought I'll tell that, I'll make that part of the story as well. The writers are supposed to use their own experiences, and so I wrote this big, long play with women and children in it, and a bear, and they all died. All of them. And 3 weeks later, we put it on. And on opening night, I was like, okay, here we go, here we go, here we go. And on it went. And when it was finished, I kind of tentatively, the curtain shut, I tentatively looked through the curtains to see what the audience reaction was, and they were all looking at the stage like this. I was like, ooh. And I went down and I grabbed one of the kids by the hair and brought him over and said, so, you didn't like it then? He was like, I've never seen anything like that in my life. And I was like, oh really? That bad? He's like, no, it was great. How did you get away with it? Oh, I've never seen so much carnage in my life. I actually had a scene where I taped bread rolls to the kids' throats and soaked them in blood, injected them with blood, and then, so when the bear ripped the blood went everywhere. That seemed good to me. And it was a hit. The kids were like, yes, more of this stuff. Parents not so much, they didn't like it, but it was for the children. And so they kept me on. They kept me on as a writer-director, and I worked there for 5 seasons before returning to Scotland. So that was the sequence of events that started me on the path to being a writer. Obviously it's not the end of the story, in fact it's more like the beginning. I didn't get rich and famous in America, but I discovered something much more important. I discovered the thing I loved. I loved telling stories, and I loved writing, and I decided that that was what I would do no matter what it took. And I did want to make money, obviously, and you can't just launch yourself into a writing career that easily. So I thought about it, I thought, what can I do? How can I use this love in a strange way? In a way that other people haven't thought of. And so I started a ghost tour company, and I began taking people into Edinburgh's what's called the Underground City, which is vaults under the ground, and into a haunted graveyard, Greyfriars Graveyard. And it worked. It worked. I made quite a bit of cash out of that. And more importantly, it gave me fuel for stories. I realised nobody had ever written a book about the Underground City, so I wrote one myself. That was my first book, and it got published. So then I wrote one about the Mackenzie poltergeist, which is the poltergeist that's supposed to haunt Greyfriars Graveyard, and that got published too. And then I threw caution to the wind and I wrote a history of Scotland, despite the fact that I had no qualifications whatsoever. I didn't even study history at school. No one checked. That was published too. And then I went on to start writing children's books and then books for young adults as well. And my struggles were far from over, really. I started to win awards. I started to get a name for myself. And the more I did that, the more publishing companies would say to me, we want you to write this, and we want you to write that, and we want you to do it like this, and you want you to do that. And I was like, okay. So I'd write my young adult book and I would send it in to the publishers, and they'd say, that's far, far, far too complex and far, far, far too violent. Kids won't like that, you think. And eventually, after about 26 or 27 books, I took a chance. It was a career ender. I knew it was going to be a career ender, but I stopped writing for publishing companies. I started my own and began publishing my own books, which meant I could write whatever I want in the way that I wanted to do it. And I also switched to writing adult horror novels as well, which is something else the publishing company wouldn't let me do. And just for good measure, I then moved to Australia, where nobody knew who the hell I was at all. But it doesn't matter. You know, I'm not making the money that I used to, but I'm writing exactly what I want to write, and that's worth it. Do what you love. That's the moral of the story. All stories should have a moral, I suppose, and that's mine. If you're a careers officer, look away now. You guys at school. If you don't know what you want to do with your life, it doesn't matter. But don't stop until you find it. I've done more jobs than I can count, and I would take a job, any kind of job, just to see what it was like, and if I didn't like it, I would work there for a couple of months and then I would leave and do something else, and again and again and repeat and again until I found the thing I wanted to do. And you should be like that as well, I think. If you've always wanted to be a doctor ever since you were a little kid, and you've gone through school and you've gone through medical school and you become a doctor and you hate being a doctor, then no matter how much it pays, don't be a doctor. Find something else. Find the thing you love. That's the best piece of advice I can give. That and create. Create stuff that's yours. If you've got no interest in writing, if you've got no interest in telling stories, then don't, but create something. Build stuff. Build a ladder. Build a shed. Do a sculpture. Build a car. Find the thing that you really, really want, and then you'll be happy. Well, there are other factors to consider as well. So, thank you very much for listening to my long rambling spiel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you got something out of it. It's certainly been a pleasure for me. I am now on book number 31, and I haven't abandoned the idea of becoming rich and famous, so if you would like to buy everything I've ever written and then tell your friends to do the same, that would be most appreciated. Otherwise, I have learned to swim now, so if anyone is looking for an apprentice marine biologist, I'm your man. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My name's Jan Henderson. Goodbye.